Hi, my name is Joby Mallet, and this is the first post, log, journal entry to something that I felt like I wanted to do, is share my struggle with sleep. It's been close to 16 years now. Literally 16 years, and of not a day off, or not a night off, I should say, in struggling with sleep. And I haven't beat it yet. As you can tell, I look tired. Probably I'm speaking slowly. I'm going through a rough stage right now. And maybe no one will ever listen to this, but I feel like I need to vent out, and I hope that I can maybe help somebody by simply empathizing with them, because it's a lonely, lonely road. And I'm sure that any terminal illness, because it does feel like a terminal sick, terminal means you're going to die, right? But man, it feels like sometimes it's a road to death. We're all on our way to death, obviously, but it feels like it's a fast road, because eventually it starts to break down other parts of your body, and that freaks the hell out of me. And I'm sure it does others. And man, I was just driving here, and on the way I was listening to a podcast about sleep, and there was this British guy who's very well known for sleep, and he says it's the cornerstone. It's the if you don't sleep, it leads to sickness and disease and heart failure, and it just like when you're struggling with it and you can't flip it off, you can't toggle it off. It's hard to hear that. It's really hard to hear that, because I'm sure a lot of people that don't sleep enough, it's their own choice. They either work late or they watch TV into the night. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. Don't see everything there. And they have a choice to, I need to change my lifestyle. I need to spend more time in bed. I shouldn't have a television in my bedroom, or I shouldn't watch myself, look at my cell phone before bed. And I'm like, wow, that's a luxury that you get to be able to do that. But there's some people, and a lot of people, probably millions of people like me, who don't have the choice because we're sick. And it feels like sometimes that you're wandering a desert. It feels to me like I'm wandering a desert and can't find my way out. I grew up in a very religious kind of background, parenting, whatever, and children of Israel, right? They were trapped in the desert, and apparently, I don't know if that's a fable or if it actually happened, but the desert wasn't that big. They just kept going around and around. They couldn't find the loop. They couldn't find the way out, and that's the way it feels for me. And so I'll have to excuse you. I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to ramble and just speak my mind, and I'll try and break this down into small parts of my journey. But 15 years ago, there was a definite line in the sand of my life where one day I slept great, and then the next I did not. And from then on, it's been a struggle, and I don't think I've had an unmedicated, good, deep sleep. I've had lots of sleep and nights where I've not been medicated at all, because I don't like to be a slave to that. But there's been, I don't think there's been a single one where I woke up feeling refreshed, or I woke up by my alarm. That would be a luxury that I can't even remember what that felt like. And my journey prior, brief overview was I grew up in England, have 3 sisters, parents, half, want to get into all of that, but pretty decent home life. I had struggles like everybody, for sure. I was an only boy, and definitely misunderstood by my father and probably my mother as well. My dad since passed away, and definitely been brought up in a very religious kind of childhood, and all the way up into my late teens, until I finally kind of felt like I needed to explore other things, and started in England and worked my way over to the United States, and from the United States up to Canada, and finally my final resting place has been in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is where I've been for the last 15 years or so. And it all kind of, this 1 year, a lot happened in my life, and I think that my sleep issues are birthed mostly out of trauma. And in one kind of year and a half, maybe 2 year period, started with my dad passing away, and I wasn't close to my dad. My dad was in England, and I wasn't actually there for his actual death, but I was there prior, and obviously at his funeral. And we were very estranged. He did not understand me. He was trapped in his own world of struggle, trying to relate to me as a boy, and just wasn't parented well himself. And the old saying, shit runs downhill, and ran towards me. And my other sisters have their own stories. So losing my dad was tough, because I felt like all the way up until the moment he died, or the last time I saw him, he still couldn't talk to me. And I think that father issues are a huge deal for people in general, and definitely for men. And it's a very common thing, especially back then, the baby boomer kind of parents who didn't have all of the self-help that we have available now, YouTube and all these different things. So that happened, and didn't know how to process it properly. I definitely had some anger in me. I felt frustrated that even on his deathbed, even then he couldn't dig down deep enough to find the wherewithal to reach out and touch me, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, whatever that was. And he just didn't have the capability. Now, I've long since forgiven him for that, and you can't hold those grudges forever. So that happened. I moved back to Canada, and then actually, as I was in England, we were there for a year helping my mom kind of relocate into a new home, and me and my then wife and 2 young children moved to England for a year, and my marriage was on the rocks, like super on the rocks. And most of the reason for that was, one, my then wife was struggling with depression, but also I had been so consumed in this radical charismatic church that I'd been in, and we'd always been in some form of radical charismatic church. And I've been married 3 times, and so I'd already been married once, and had a very rough experience getting divorced and kicked out of a very, very big church in Toronto. Moved to Kamloops, fell in love with her, and we had 2 kids, and it was a very fiery relationship, but I loved her. I was totally in love with her. And what I realize now, and this is a whole other tangent, is I realized that the only way that the only way I knew love was to chase hard for it and fight for it. I didn't know the free love, the other kind of love where it's freely given. I only knew how to fight for things in my life, and that relationship I had to fight a lot for. But I was super in love with God, with Jesus, and with his calling on my life, or what I thought it was. And that was number one, 100%. That was number one in my life before my wife. And she paid a price for it. Our marriage paid the biggest price for it. And when we got to England, it hit a crux. And I remember her saying, it's either me or the church, but I can't, it's like and having that little reprieve in England gave me a chance to relook at religion. And I had a lot of ego and pride about it. I thought that I was taking the high road by following God before others, because in the Bible it says, love God with all your heart, and love God before your family. Like, the difference between loving God and your family is worlds apart. Like, you love Him beyond all else. And you can believe that or not. I tend not to believe that anymore, because I felt like it was my ego was getting in the way. Now I realize that it took me a long time. There's a lot of pride. But in England, over that year, I started to destruct in my head and actually allowed myself to step back and allow myself to tread on the very thin ice of questioning God, questioning faith, questioning religion. I didn't question God then. I definitely questioned organized religion, and I for sure questioned the spiritual leader that I put myself under, and a very strong personality. I would think he would be 100% classic narcissistic personality, textbook. All the traits of a cult leader, really. I mean, you watch the Netflix movie Waco, and man, that guy was a lot like the person I was under. And you can't even imagine what that does to one. And so when I went back to Canada, I had a whole different view. I was like, I think I'm seeing things. I feel like the veil's gone. And I walked into church and it just felt all fake to me. I mean, it was literally like suddenly I understood the language. It was like I saw the Matrix 100%. I was like, whoa, this is all so fake and I can't be a part of it. And so me and my then wife left from there and headed to Vancouver. She got offered a job, and I'd gotten really into music and very inspired to write music. And so we moved to Vancouver, and we moved with the whole band, and I was about 23, 24, I believe, and we were going to make it in music, and I was very driven, tenacious. If I put my mind to something, it was going to happen. I would make it happen. And I wasn't super talented. I dug for that talent, and I didn't have any help, and but I sure had a lot of content to pull from, a lot of experience to write songs about. It wasn't all about love. It was about real struggle. And so that was a bonus, I guess. So all in that year, I kind of lost my dad, questioned my faith, left a church that kicked me to the curb when I confronted the everything, and they say spiritual intimacy is more intimate than physical, one-on human to human intimacy, and that walking away from the church really did feel like I was walking away from God, and there was this huge sense of guilt there. And also second guessing myself often, like, have I done the right thing? Have I done it? I don't know. I didn't feel sure beyond a shadow of a doubt. We were the outliers. Like, we were making the move before anyone else did. And since then, that church has fallen apart. So it was really like scary, but I didn't know how to process it. And so you're kind of in the eye of the storm. You have energy and you just go for it. And we moved to Vancouver, and I started writing music. So that was another big part. So losing my dad, leaving the church, questioning my faith, and then starting to write music. Now the music part, you might think, oh my God, like, what the heck would that have to do with it? But it was a big deal. It was like I had untapped a part of my mind that I had never tapped into before, like the artistic river. I had like walked over a mountain and seen this artistic river, and it was like, it was good and evil, because art can draw you in, it can consume you. You know, you study any of the famous artists, you know, Picasso and Amadeus, and they were all driven like almost like a demon was pushing them to paint Sistine Chapel until you're sick and you lose your family. And Amadeus was mad, and basically got buried in a pit because he just with poor people, because he just drove himself to death. The art did. And I'm now realizing that it's ego, right? Like the ego is this whole nother topic. It feels like the ego's mission is to kill us one way or another, to drive us into the ground. Evil thing. And I won't claim to fully understand the ego. So, yeah, the art was a really big thing, and I always blamed music. I was like, for my sleep, I always looked back and thought, oh, it was the music. That was what changed it all. But it was the music and everything else. And I haven't, the music might be an oddball for most people to get their head around unless you're an artist. But when you're an artist and you're A-type personality, it's probably like trying to do a sport and win. I mean, be a boxer, fighter, driver, runner. If you've got it in your heart to win, like in music, I had it in my heart to go all the way, to make a career out of it. And that meant I had to wrestle these songs. I had a very, very high standard of what I wanted to meet with these songs. And so it would keep me up at night. I would wrestle these songs. I'd be like, that chorus isn't right, that word isn't right. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and write lyrics down and then mixed in with all of this in this blender of like a perfect storm. My marriage again just started to fragment, and we started to explore all the things that we had not explored being in the church, partying and all kinds of kind of sexual exploration with others and alcohol, and it just destroyed our marriage. And the guilt that goes along with destroying your marriage, or letting your marriage kind of fall to the rocks, fall into the flames, is when you have two young kids, and watching them hurt was really hard for me, to realize that the first taste of reality was dad. I'd given it to them, dad and mom. I could only be responsible for my part, but that was heavy. And so just talking about it, kind of sheds light on the fact that no wonder you're fucked up. Like, no wonder there's a big problem here. It's like a perfect storm of just disaster. And so I started to not sleep. I mean, I'm to the point where I would literally wake up an hour before I had to go to work, and I'd be dizzy. Like, my head would be spinning, and I'd have to go and work, and it was dangerous to drive. And thank God there was no cell phones there wasn't any smartphones back then, so there was no texting and driving. But it was dangerous, and I got addicted to NyQuil. That was my first sleep aid, and NyQuil is hardcore on you. It's horrible. It's super chemically, but it knocks you right out, and it makes you feel so rough in the morning. And it was kind of the joke when we were touring as a band that on my rider, which is, I would ask for NyQuil. And they were like, oh man, it's not very rock and roll. You should be asking for a plate of cocaine. But NyQuil was my vice, and I didn't go anywhere without it. And I felt very scared if I didn't have any NyQuil, because it meant a sleepless night. So that's kind of where my 15-year sleep struggle started, and I'll share more of my stories. And I'm in the midst of the storm, right? It's a ebb and a flow. You go through periods where you sleep well, and then when you're in the low part, man, it sucks. You have dark thoughts, and it's lonely, because I've been around people who have had chronic sickness, and it gets so tiring as the listener, as the person that's not dealing with the sickness, to hear it over and over again, because empathy has like a bottom. Like, you kind of like, oh, I'm really sorry you're struggling with that. I'm really sorry that you're going through that. But then what do you say the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and then the next day, and the next day after that? And as a man, we're problem solvers. I realize that. I'm a problem solver, and I want to solve the problem. When I can't solve the problem, I don't know what to say. And so I feel for those. So you start to withdraw and not tell people anymore. But this problem has defined me, it feels like, and that sucks. it feels like all I think about. And I'm sure if you've got back pain or cancer or leukemia or whatever you've got, that thing starts to define you, and it's all you think about from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, if you do sleep, is that. And it consumes you, and it almost becomes I don't know if I'm feeding it. I don't know. It's another conversation. So anyway, I don't know what else to say. I'm really fucking tired, and I'll talk to you again.